don't have a whole lot in the way of announcements to make. I have got an interesting link to give you, if I can find it, for a radio program on that took place in San Francisco. It was called What Happened to Nonviolent Resistance. And it's a very good discussion with Jack Duvall from the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict and a woman who is now the director of the Ruckus Society. And we're going to be talking about both of those organizations in a bit. So if I run across that link, I'll put it on the board. And oh yeah, here we go. It's yourcallradio.org in the archive. When I send these things to you in course link, it doesn't seem to work very well. You don't get the link, so I'll write it out here. 011507. Yeah, it looks like the last word is Ram. I didn't plan it that way. Maybe I wrote it wrong, but this probably, even if it isn't Ram, it'll get you there, I'm sure. So that's a very good interview. I think Jack Duvall does a terrific job coming at the culture of nonviolent resistance now from a strictly strategic point of view, but coming out very much on the same page as we're coming out from the principle point of view. He has a very, very good definition of Nagler's Law, though he calls it by some other weird name. And it'll be a good introduction to what both of those groups do. So before I start, you remember on Tuesday we did an overview of the theory, and today we're going to try to talk about training and organization as the state of the art in nonviolent movements today. I know a lot less about training and organization than I do about theory, but not knowing about something has never prevented me from lecturing about it. And I don't think I should start now. And we're going to get into that very soon. But before we start, I wondered if you had any thoughts or any comments about our guest speaker on Tuesday, Paul Chappell, from courtesy of the United States Army. Yeah, Paula?
People believe it's to see someone coming from the army who has been in the war and who's willing to go back to the war as a scientific aversion as well. So tell me about the non-violence. How we can implement non-violence. It was confusing and pleasant at the same time. Yeah, confusing and pleasant at the same time. I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, he's a very pleasant guy, and he's very, very well-spoken and very sincere. What I got out of that was two things, and we were both along the line with it. On the one hand, it shows you how our system has become a trap for all of us on different levels. He enlists in the army because he's very poor economically, and because he's a recognizable ethnic minority. He didn't say this, of course, but because he's an ethnic minority, it's an entree into legitimacy in American society to join the military. But once you join it, it closes behind you, and it's very, very difficult to get out of it. And the other thing that struck me is here he is appealing to us, the American people, to get out of the war, and it requiring of us a certain amount of courage and sacrifice and risk. How much stronger his position would be if he would step out and be a conscientious objector and say, okay, I've done my part, now I'm calling on you people to do your part. This is fundamental in nonviolence. In fact, it's fundamental in everything, that you call upon people to do something that you have not done yourself. The appeal is very weak. So it would be much stronger. I didn't suggest this to him, and I decided not to, unless he's listening to this webcast. He's not going to hear me saying this. It's his decision to make. But he doesn't have to do exactly what we are being called upon to do, but he has to do the equivalent. In a way, it's harder for him, of course, because he's got that whole institution. And as I think I mentioned on Tuesday, desertions are up 300%, multiplied by a factor of 3, compensation, in the last few years. And as a result of that, the Army has been cracking down on desertions. But it shows us, I think, how militarism and violence can become a trap on so many levels. One of the most effective this is a term from Kenneth Boulding. He called it the sacrifice trap. And I think I may have mentioned it before. Once you have sacrificed for something, especially if you've sacrificed human life, it gets very difficult to say, oh, we made a mistake, it wasn't worth it. So having thrown away some lives, you then feel a pressure to throw away a lot more of them in order to demonstrate that the thing that you were doing was worth it. Yeah, we have talked about that, I guess. Okay, any other comments about, yeah, Andrea? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's all strategic, and you should protest and stop this thing so it'll save me from going back. I mean, one can hardly blame him for wanting that to happen, but you're right. There was no real engagement there with the principles, and if we were to ask ourselves compassionately why not, the answer is very obvious. It would immediately throw him into cognitive dissonance at a very, very deep level. We had someone in the A course. They all do sort of run together after a while. I think this was 2 years ago. He was a chaplain in the U.S. Navy. He just come back from a tour of duty with the Marines, and I said to him over coffee, we were speaking Dutch incidentally, just that he would feel at home. He had something I've been for several years in Holland. And I said, I hope you're not experiencing cognitive dissonance. And he said, Professor Nagler, I'm experiencing cognitive chaos. Dissonance, it doesn't begin to say it. Because even to begin to come to grips with the idea that A, there's an alternative, and B, it represents human nature more immediately and more accurately than the warfighting part, is to just throw yourself into confusion if you've made that kind of commitment. So that, again, on the cognitive level is how the trap works. It is nearly impossible for a human being to say, what I'm doing is wrong, but that's okay, I'm going to keep on doing it. It's very difficult for a person to say that. So when you reach this cognitive dissonance, they usually say, what I was doing was okay for the following reasons. And I hope you won't feel this is cynical, but I wanted you to hear his reasons, knowing full well that I didn't believe them and you won't believe them, but it's interesting to hear where these people are coming from and what they have to do to make themselves feel reasonably comfortable with what they're doing. So we have been advised, we the Peace Movement have been advised by Kenneth Boulding for many, many years now. I mean, he's passed on, but he used to say, we have overlooked our biggest opportunity in not finding a way to approach the military. I told you that story, didn't I, about my friend in an elevator in Washington? Yeah, I think probably 1 out of every 4 people in military service is desperately looking around for a way out of it. And that's huge. I mean, you need really 5% to make a big change in a situation, in a system like that. So if we've got 25% who are ready and willing to step out, if we show them something to step onto, remember Toynbee's famous thing about Gandhi? He made it impossible for us to go on ruling India, but he made it possible for us to leave without rancor or humiliation.
Now, if you look at anti-war protests during the Vietnam era, it was 100% rancor and humiliation. We were so infuriated, and we took it out on the people who were trapped by the system at the lowest level. So we should learn that lesson and find a way that we can present them with a comfortable, secure, I mean emotionally comfortable and secure stepping stone to step onto. Think of other ways that we can use their courage, their dedication, their discipline, and so forth. Amy?
I was just going to say, like, there were definitely a lot of shortcomings there, but I
Yeah.
think that he had some very good points. And I think that calling nonviolence peaceful democratic change, and some people it might help, because
Might help.
sometimes people don't know
Yeah.
what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think using the term nonviolence is sometimes maybe explaining it in that way might help. And also, his emphasis on appealing to conservatives.
Yes.
through
That was the part that I thought could really be most useful to us, because he's coming from that camp, so he can share with us how to talk to conservatives and people that don't agree with us. I wish he had said a little bit more about that. As far as
Christian nonviolence.
will help for a certain type of conservative. Yeah, yeah. Just hang on a second. This comes up all the time. People encounter the word nonviolence. They recognize it's not a very good one, and they start offering substitutions. But in the end, I've just come back to nonviolence in hopes that we can explain. But at least we've gotten rid of the hyphen. That helps a lot. When it was non-violence, it was even worse. It was really clunky. And now at least we're sort of hinting that there's a thing there, not a non-something. So until something better comes along, let's forge ahead with that. Unfortunately, Americans are not like Japanese. Now, why do I say that? They're not like Japanese in that we don't import a lot of foreign words very easily into our own vocabulary right now. We're also not like most Europeans, with the exception of the French, in that regard. So it's going to have to be an English word. We can't go around saying satyagraha. First of all, people can't pronounce it. Second of all, we're defeating our purpose because we're trying to show that this is something that's native to us, and here we are saying it comes from some foreign language. Yeah, Artie, what did you want to?
I was just kind of like expanding on that, because first, one thing that kind of like struck me when he was talking is like, you said nonviolence and negation of violence. Like, we know that because we're in a nonviolence class, but it kind of makes sense, like, people who aren't in a nonviolence class haven't heard of it.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we have to deal with. Just 1 second, Shannon. A friend of mine pointed out, not without a certain amount of bitterness, that here he is writing a book on the peace movement and had absolutely no exposure to it. I mean, the reason that I met him and all these other people met him was he wanted to meet some people in the peace movement after writing a book on us. And now, he can't be blamed for that, because this is what we've been saying all along. The word is just not out there. That's probably what we're about. Shannon? You have to be a little bit louder. We have this. Yeah. Yeah. He was doing what? Yes. Yeah. 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 He was self-wondering, and I wanted you to hear that, because this is a kind of person. If we can't reach him, and in a way we already have, but we need to enlarge his understanding. Like in Metta, we talk about inspiration, education, and support. So he's past the inspiration point, but we would need to educate him. But we would need to be quite sensitive and respectful of the difficulties and the dangers of his position, and not yank the stool out from under him. So yeah.
Well, I feel like his presentation didn't work for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, again, his use of words that politicians use all the time is something that like the average American who's never heard of nonviolence sort of won't resonate with. Like,
good point.
To us, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Other people that make a lot more sense.
It might work much better for them. Yeah, so it's a strategic choice we've got to decide. Do we give them something they're familiar with and gradually lead them to expand it, or do we give them the whole thing and try to help them cope with the shock of the unfamiliar and then bring them over? And I think it's just a judgment call depending on who we're talking to. Yeah. John? Yeah.
But I don't think he understands the difference. Like, I think if you look at bullets, say,
Yeah.
he doesn't understand how hard it is to actually have all these people in the organizing actually get out of the rest, It's even if looking at people one side,
Well, there is there is the, you can misuse. That's why I brought up my point, which is actually a point that was made by Immanuel Kant in 1795. So it's been around for a while. That in a way, when democracies go to war, it's worse because you have this spongy, nondescript decider. It's much better when you have some person get up and say, I'm the decider. That person also has the responsibility. But when you say it's the American people, and then you turn around, there's no way to find out what the American people are really saying. I'm an American person, by the way. I was not in favor of this thing. I was not in favor of the massacre at My Lai, but Lieutenant Calley said, I will carry out the will of the American people forever, which he later repudiated, incidentally. So, it's a little bit like this ancient sacrificial practices where when they were going to kill a person, they didn't just designate the priest who's going to stand up and do it. They somehow spread it out among the whole community. So therefore, you really can't. And then I noticed to my shock that when we carry out executions, in the former method used to be gas chamber, you used to have 3 people pulling 3 levers, and you didn't know which one actually dropped the pellet into the vat. So you were doing exactly the same thing that these ancient ritualists had done, and exactly the same thing that we hide behind when we say, oh, it's the will of the people. But A, you haven't really canvassed all of them. B, there are some issues which are not questions of majority opinion. As Martin Luther King said, in some cases, I don't care what the majority says. Even wasn't it the governor of Indiana? No, it was the governor of New York. The majority of New Yorkers, by a slight margin, were in favor of the death penalty. And he said, I'm sorry, this is a moral issue, and it's not a question of numbers. There's not going to be any executions under my watch. So there's those 2 things. And then thirdly, a big issue, which he didn't address and almost never gets addressed, is what if the American people have been lied to? Just theoretically. And then really, what is the value of that moral judgment, of course? Yeah, Shannon. People don't what? Yeah. Yeah, that's where we... Yeah. You know what that reminds me of? That people don't want war, they want survival. It's like St. Augustine said, nobody wants war, everybody wants peace, but they think that war is the way to get there. It's a lot like, we're going to hear next week from someone who is a representative of nonviolent communication, and their whole approach is based on discriminating between needs and strategies. And this is not unlike things that we've come out through the nonviolent economics route and through other routes. On the level of real needs, there is no conflict among human beings, between human beings and the planet, between human beings and animal life. There's like, I have no problem with the squirrels that we just saw over in the FSM cafe. But there's a distortion that comes in where we think that our method of achieving those needs is what we need. And it's on that level that we get into conflicts. So it's just a question of disentangling that. For a person, we have to do that in ourselves and then help the other person to see that. Well, all I can say is it could have been a lot worse. I have had people who were from the military affairs programs here come in and talk about what they're doing. You remember some, and really they did a much worse job of explaining what the purpose of militarism is than Paul did. So I was amazed, actually, to tell you the truth, at the things that he felt that he could say. Because we've had people come into this class and we say, what about this? And they say, I'm not allowed to talk about that. Okay, there's one issue, hang on one second, Paul, there's one issue we haven't discussed yet, and that is the legitimacy of putting yourself, I suppose we have touched on it, but it's worth repetition. As T.S. Eliot says, you will say that I am repeating myself. Very well, I will say it again. It is not okay to surrender your, I'm going to use a term here, I hope you'll not misunderstand. It is not okay to surrender your moral judgments to another person or group. There are certain things for which you as an individual have to retain responsibility. And life and death, killing or non-killing, is one of them. That was what the Nuremberg principles were all about. Matthias? Oh, yeah. You and then Paolo.
So for the sake of, it felt like you didn't own up to the fact that you decided to put
Yeah.
responsibility on people. Like, you have a choice.
I remember one of the people, you have a choice. That's what we always have to bring home to them, but we have to be able to do it gently and respectfully so that they can. But we had one person who came in here this class and said, well, if the war is legal and it's been declared by constitutional authority, then I'm supposed to carry it out. But it turns out that the president had not been elected, he had been electoral fraud, and the war was illegal, and he was still carrying it out. And that's the thing. They say we will only do it within this legal framework, but once they get into the system, they're just going to do it. Trap. Yeah, Paolo?
One of the points I found really interesting, and I think went to your information, is the privatization of the military.
Oh, very good point. This is terrific.
I've watched documentaries, I've been reading about it, but the fact that it said we don't know how many private companies, how many of them were killed.
Yeah.
It's not democratic anymore.
Yeah.
What would you tell us about that?
Well, not anything very pleasant. The person I'd recommend to read on this subject is Naomi Klein. She's a journalist from Canada who has documented in great detail. She wrote a book called No Logo about globalization, and she has documented in great detail two things about the experiment in Iraq, and this is why I've been convincing a lot of my colleagues in the peace movement that we have to stop that experiment. It has to fail, because if it fails, we may have gotten leverage to stop globalization, and if they succeed with that, globalization will be globalization from above, of course, will be very, very difficult to stop. So one of the things that she showed is that what they're doing in Iraq is like a perfect laboratory case of how you do neoliberalism, how you eliminate the competition, downsize the government, and privatize everything. In Iraq, human beings have been sharing water from the Tigris and the Euphrates for 7,000 years without much difficulty. But we move in there, we being Bechtel and certain other say, oh, you're wasting this terrific opportunity. This is water. This is a source of profit. And they privatize it and start selling it to people. The whole catastrophe, as Zorba the Greek says. But the other point that she was making is that the army has been corporatized and privatized. The army is described now in corporate language as having a core competence. This is how CEOs speak. In CEO speak, you say they have a core competence, namely combat. Everything else should be supplied by profit-making private institutions. So everything from getting your haircut to sending a letter home, in some cases getting armor, and now you're having these private militias, which if you remember our lecture from John Lindsay Poland, this again is it's a shell game, it's a way of hiding responsibility. Remember, the Colombian army is responsible to the government of that country, which is ultimately responsible to global opinion and American money, the two being almost synonymous in this case. So they can't carry out human rights abuses. So what do? They set up a private militia, they funnel all the money and the weapons to them, and they carry out the abuses, and the army looks clean. So similarly, this is why, if you look back at Roman history, there were these Praetorian guards, which served as the bodyguards for the emperor. Now, once you had a bodyguard, the temptation was to use them for purposes other than protecting yourself from bandits and terrorism, but use them for everything for which you can use threat power. So these private militias, the Praesidium, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. The abuses got worse and worse. And on the road to democracy, one of the most important steps was not to have private, mercenary militias. They had to be under the control of the state decision-making apparatus, however flawed it was. So we have now gone backwards about 1,800 years in setting up Blackwater and all these private companies. Yes, Alex. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Not to mention, if you read Kathy Kelly, who has spent a lot of time in Iraq, and you have a bit of a thing from her writing in your reader, which as usual we'll never get to, but I hope you read it and enjoy it. She points out that the average Iraqi who is facing destitution can earn $7,000 or $8,000 at some enterprise within Iraq, or he can be paid, $60,000 or $70,000 for working in some capacity with the army or one of these private corporations, in security or some other capacity. In which capacity he is very likely to be assassinated by his fellow Iraqis. So just to create somehow injecting a huge amount of violence into that country has not made it better. So maybe that should be our last comment on what Paul Chappell shared with us and that situation. Talk a little bit now about training and organization. The way I see the training is on 3 levels, and that will not surprise you because by now you know, for me, reality comes in 3 levels, and I'm going to see everything in 3 levels. But for better or for worse, hope you all got this. I'm going to start with the deepest level, which is also the part that